One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your one of your hosts, but today we are continuing our science fiction themed month, which Forrest can tell us all about the film that we are going to be going on about. So, Forrest, take it away, man.
Thank you, Dave. This month's theme, the first theme of 2021 on Inside is Days of Future Past, futuristic science fiction movies where the year the movie takes place, the movies take place have come and gone.
And not exactly an X-Men movie.
Yep. We're continuing on from our pre-show with we discussed Back to the Future. Now we're on 1989's Back to the Future Part 2, directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Bob Gale, starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Thomas F. Wilson, Leah Thompson, Elizabeth Shue, and Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up exactly where the first movie ended. Doc Brown comes back from the future and tells Marty and Jennifer that they have to come back with him to the future because of their kids.
Mm-hmm.
They go 30 years into the year 2015, where Marty and Jennifer turn out okay, not the assholes that Marty had suggested they probably were, but. But the issue is the kids. Their son Marty Jr. has been set up for a robbery and sent to jail, and their daughter is later arrested and sent to jail for trying to break him out. So I guess we'll go we'll get to all that, but I guess we'll see how everybody's first. This is everybody's first time rewatch. All right, so I'm going to go clockwise. No pun intended. Dustin, is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
He's away from the computer.
Okay. Okay. I'll start with Jake. Is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
Definitely not. As I think I said with the other one, I definitely have not seen this one as many times as I have the first one. But I really don't know for sure how many times. I saw it probably not long after its release. I do vaguely remember, because this one, the third one, came out back to back. I feel like I do remember the release of the third one better than I remember the release of the second, if that makes any sense, but I'm not sure. I've seen this one here and there through the years. And again, I did do that screening when I saw the first two back-to-back in 2015 on the day that it supposedly took place, which was really fun. I have generally always liked it. I feel like this is probably my first time watching the trilogy as a trilogy where I really saw it as such, even though I know the second two came later. They didn't really plan on a trilogy from the get-go. I feel like before I might have thought this suffered a little bit as a sequel. And it's also a lot busier than the first film. There's a lot of stuff happening, if you will. But overall, though, I still like it quite a bit. It's very entertaining. Just in general, the franchise, very entertaining.
Okay. Brandon, is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
Oh, most certainly not. This, though, it's not the film that I would consider the best made of the three. I would consider it my favorite of the three. I probably watched this many times more than I've watched any of the other two. And That's because it seemed to be the one that's always broadcast on TV. Whenever they were broadcasting a Back to the Future film, it was almost always this one. And I caught this constantly growing up. I think I want to even say that this might have been seen before the first one. I still can't remember, but I feel like that might have been the case. And I just this one embodies the entire series to me. When I think of Back to the Future, 90% of the time I'm thinking about this film. It's fun, it has a lot of memorable scenes, and just in general for me, maybe it's oversaturation, but hey, it definitely stuck with me.
All right. Mo, is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
No, I've never seen it, and I actually didn't even watch it for this. I've seen it a billion times, man. I mean, it's great. It's, I can't pinpoint when exactly I saw it, because back then, we were definitely checking out a lot of movies from the library when we would stay at my grandpa's house. So I saw this kind of in that same run as first seeing like the Star Wars trilogy and this stuff, and maybe a couple of the Indiana Jones. I don't remember if I saw those prior or both after the library like sequence of stuff. I know I saw Conan the Destroyer shortly for the first time, like after having watched this. So I don't know when I saw this the first time, but over the years, it's always really made an impression on me as like a sequel that perfectly does everything the first one did, but in a different way and bigger and better and more exciting, So yeah, that's kind of my overall impression of it in terms of, I guess, the stakes or whatever. Is because it is more of an intentional sequel. It kind of loses some of that for me. It's more of just a fun vibe and not necessarily like a proper desperate vibe like the first one has. But I guess that all largely depends on how you're looking at it and what mood you're going into it with. I could totally see how it would be most people's most watched movie in the trilogy and why they would love it a lot. I'm still always like gravitated to the first one though. It's just the best of the three for me. But if there was a runner-up, it'd be this one. And I mean, I do like the Western one too, so I can't really say much bad about it. But
I love all three of them. I think they fit together so nicely.
Indeed.
Dave, is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
Oh no, this is definitely not my first time watching it. But I have actually been on the opposite end of Brandon. To me, the first one has always been repeated enough times, and then it's like they'd play the first one and then the third one, and then the second one would like not be on, and I'd be, well, what the fuck? Why don't you just play all three or some shit like that, So, but I thought that this was a fairly decent sequel for the time that it came out. No, the sequel wasn't entirely planned, but it was definitely welcomed. And I think that it has also become a cult classic for many. And in 2015, I know a lot of the things that happened in the film were created, like the hoverboard, was a big controversy on some of the things that transpired. Did they actually happen? But
we'll dive into that.
But I always got a kick out of the future. Especially with the 3D animated shark.
Still looks fake.
But
Boy, that is a terrible looking CGI shark.
Yeah, even the 3D shark and bad CGI shark was even better than that.
That's not a.
But ultimately, this was an enjoyable sequel for me. I mean, although it was kind of interesting to learn about all the things why George Mcfly was not in the film originally. So.
Yeah.
But In any case, I mean, I love returning to this film. I love the fact that the DeLorean can fly, uh, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure we have some of the things like the thumbprints for certain doors and shit. So it could happen.
Okay,
But-
Dane, is this your first time? Is this your first time watching Back to the Future Part 2?
Not at all. And in fact, I know exactly where I was when I saw this movie for the first time. So um, I saw part one and part three pretty close to each other because they were on, in close proximity. My dad wouldn't let us watch part two for a few years just because it was darker than the first one. And I actually saw it in 2001, and I saw it when it broadcast on the Disney Channel of all places, which is kind of weird because it's not a Disney film. But and there were certain things that they definitely cut out. But
I remember I once saw Jaws 2 on the Disney Channel. The Disney
Hell
Channel used to be
yes.
cool.
I remember
I
watching both
know
on Disney
it's just
Channel.
such a weird idea. But anyway, I did see it then,
That's amazing.
and
I missed
so
that.
the part that which I loved it, of course. Now the part that really stuck out to me, and it would only stick out to me or anyone else that shares the same birthday, is because they go to the future on October 21st, 2015, which was the date of my 24th birthday, or what would be my 24th birthday. And I remembered when I heard that as a kid, I was freaking out because I was like, wow, I'll be 24. I can't believe it. Like, I'm going to have this amazing life. I'm going to have, I'm going to watch this movie with all of my friends and have a big party. And that's what I kept telling myself ever since I saw that movie. I had that vision in my head, and it was something I really look forward to every year. I thought about how I was one step closer to that, and then it's kind of a sad memory because on the actual day of my 24th birthday, I did watch the movie, but I had a pretty bad day at work. I did not have a big party with my friends. I didn't really have many friends at that point. My grandma and some other like adult friends of my parents came by to see my apartment that I couldn't realistically afford because my parents set me up in this place that I couldn't realistically afford. And then I didn't get any presents. I just got money, and then my dad told me to deposit it right away because he was mad at me. And so I ended up watching the movie by myself alone in my apartment at late at night because I couldn't fit it in to the rest of the day's schedule, and so it was a very sad memory. It's something I look forward to for so many years, and it ended up to be one of the biggest disappointments of my life. But that's tangential to the story itself. I loved the film itself, and it's not as good as the first one, but what really could be. Um, it it was a very good second place, though, because I feel like I like that you go to multiple time periods. I like the fact that the DeLorean can fly. I like the sports almanac angle. I think my favorite thing is when they go back to 1955 and you see either new scenes, new things that happened that we didn't get to see in the first one, or we get to see the same scenes from a different angle. And I was like, I love whenever I can see the same scenes, but from an angle that we didn't get to see, like something that was left on the cutting room floor or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. Dustin.
Well, I first saw this movie in bits and pieces on, it may have been the Disney Channel, but I'm not really sure. So I was kind of confused by this movie the first time I saw it because of the timeline jumping that they do. But overall, this movie is about as good as the first one. It does a lot of clever things with going to 1955 and seeing it from different perspectives and adding content. Seeing the future 2015, which feels like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the alternate 1985, which is just, well, our current
I was gonna
situation.
say that was more like 2020.
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, this movie is just great. Like, it's part of. I think the Back to the Future trilogy is probably one of the best trilogies in existence.
Without a doubt. It's up there with the original Star Wars trilogy.
Well, and just this as being a second movie in a series, just as a follow-up to a pretty brilliant movie, it can't go understated that this would have to be in the top echelons of like direct sequels of all time. Rocky 2, Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it's like right there, man. What was it? Temple of Doom was the second one. Yeah, it's when I think of great sequels, even though this isn't my favorite movie in the trilogy, it's like one of my favorite sequels of all time. If that makes sense, it has to be. I mean, it just kicks so much ass.
I think this is my favorite sequel of any sequel that's out there, to be honest.
You didn't like Critters 2 with the whole Easter angle and stuff?
I liked it, but I think that this film was better. So
what about Titanic 2, the best sequel of all time?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't get into Titanic 2, even though it was with Bruce Davis.
Or
you weren't there, Dave. Okay.
Was there really a Titanic 2, or are you messing with me?
No, it wasn't made by James Cameron. It's not in that continuity, but yes, there's a real Titanic 2.
It has a rapping dog.
Oh, that's Titanic, The
else.
Legend Goes On.
What was it like about the people trapped in the boat?
But no, look it up though. There is a real Titanic too, I swear.
Unless it's like about the people that were trapped in the part of the boat that sank, and they're doing like some Poseidon adventure stuff. I just don't care. Unless Gene Hackman's down there yelling at people, then just get out with it.
Whose impression is next?
Oh, mine. Okay, so not my first time seeing it. Definitely not my first time seeing it either. I think the first time I saw it, I caught it on first time I saw it, I think I caught it on television. And at that point, I'd seen a little bit of the first one, I knew when I saw I think when I tuned in, it was the part where Biff was chasing Marty through the casino through the hotel in the alternate 1985. And when I saw the DeLorean, I'm like, okay, yeah, now I know this is Back to the Future. When I saw the flying DeLorean, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is Back to the Future. And I later got it on, and after I got the first movie on VHS, I got the second movie as a birthday gift. I got this one as a birthday gift. I definitely, for me as a kid, I thought this was the best one in the franchise just because of all the time jumping, the flying DeLorean, the hoverboard, just their whole idea of what the 21st century was going to be like.
Nikes.
Yeah, right.
Which those did get made.
Power laces.
Power laces.
Yes, they did.
Nowadays I would say I prefer the first one more, but I think it's still like I still think it's a perfect sequel, perfect follow up. Personally, I like to try. The fact that 2015 happened is now come and gone. It didn't quite turn out how this movie portrayed it, but I like to chalk all that up to Marty's refusal to race needles in the third one.
Yeah. Well, because that's what happens in the third one at the end was Doc says that your future hasn't been written yet, so they have to live their lives as they will.
Yeah, but I like to think the ending of Part 3 caused a ripple effect, causing 2015 to play out a little differently than it really did than it did in the movies.
Damn it, Marty, you wuss.
Maybe we can blame 2020 on Marty having fucked up.
Right. Make that trend on Twitter. Blame Marty. #.
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead of thanks Obama, it'd be thanks Marty.
Yep. And I will say this applies for the franchise as a whole. I would say Back to the Future is one of my top 3 film scores of all. Ellen Silvestri's score is one of my top 3 film scores of all time.
Yeah.
You notice that they say, frankly, throughout the timeline is like. They keep iterating that the creation of the time machine was bad. But considering everything that happens to Marty throughout this, the fact that you see him at the beginning of the first movie and how he is by the end of the third movie, time machine has done nothing but good for his life at the end
Yep.
of the
Oh yeah. Well, and he's grown up a lot despite like if you actually look at he as soon as he gets back from 1955 in the first one, then he has to go right back to 2015 and he has to like for him like how long he spends out of his own time, it's like a couple weeks, I think.
A week in the first movie, a week in the second, in the third movie.
What'd you say?
I say a week in the first movie and about a week in the third movie.
Yeah, and you know, he just kind of keeps on the move in this one, but it's like, let's just be conservative in our estimation, say like it's 2 weeks where he's seen more than any other human being in history outside of Doc Brown. And it's like, he must have, I'm sure he's grown up a lot inside despite only being like 2 weeks older than he might otherwise be.
I don't know why that's funny to me right now.
Seeing so much in 130 years in 2 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much. Hey, put that on the trilogy timeline, or put that as a tagline.
When we're starting with the plot, if you notice, even though they did repeat the ending of the first film where it sets up the second film, you can tell that there has definitely been time between the first and the second film.
Yeah.
Hairstyles have changed.
Yeah. Actresses have changed.
Everything is like
Michael J. Fox looks a little like you can tell looks older.
He does, and they changed over the actress to Elizabeth Shue, and you can also tell like one thing that did kind of bug me about it. Like I knew why they had to do it because of the actress change, but they also I could tell why they did it because of the continuity. But one thing you notice is that his delivery in that recreated opening scene, which is your recreated ending scene of the first one, his delivery is quite a bit more listless. Everybody feels like they're kind of going through the motions, which is kind of weird because they're not that way through the rest of the movie, but just for that one thing, they feel kind of listless. And I think it's because they're trying to recreate what they did before, and it was like 4 years. It was 4 years before, and home video was still in its relative infancy, and so it's just kind of odd, But I'm sure it's just because they're trying to do a recreation of what they already did.
The one thing I remember from that part that stood out to me as different in that part, that I actually thought was a really cool thing, was that when that part where what do we become, assholes or something?
Yeah.
I felt like Christopher Lloyd paused for half a beat before answering the question.
He did.
Like I don't think he did that the first time, and
no,
I just thought
he didn't.
I thought that was great. Like he had to think before answering.
Well, I like that. That's actually a good touch. Now you could chalk that up partially to editing, because of how that scene's cut in the ending of the first one, versus the way it's done here. What I like about that half-second pause is that you can tell that he's trying to sugarcoat the full impact of the blow of his life from Marty and Jennifer, and I think that's a good touch because indeed, not that they become assholes, but they do not embrace the fullness of their potential in the way that they could have. And obviously we find out why that is, but that's just a good touch. That's the advantage of having redone that sequence.
And I love how he throws just like any kind of garbage into the tank before they lift off. It's like a half-empty bottle, a can of beer, a banana, some cabbage, or some shit like that. You know?
Mr. Fusion.
I wish our 2015 would come up with Mr. Fusion.
Seriously, we could use that.
Yeah, we need a blender for an engine, hey?
As one possible advancement, we have made many breakthroughs towards fusion energy, but after 2015, and still no Mr. Fusion.
Yeah, which the closest that we have to Mr. Fusion is you have those Nutra Ninja blenders, and you have people that do compost heaps and stuff, but you don't have them all in one place.
And supposedly, when they actually went back and refurbished the car, it was really hard for them to come up with a Mr. Fusion exactment to it, and able to put it into their museum that they ended up putting the car into. I don't know if any of you have watched the documentary on how they actually took the car and refurbished it and rebuilt it and all that jazz, and just kind of found like all the different pieces and parts that the original car had for this for the movies in general, because there were actually three particular pieces of cars used throughout the trilogy, and it was definitely an interesting documentary if you guys ever wanted to check it out. I forgot what it was called, but
all right. So okay, so we're in. So Marty's in 2015 impersonating his son, his future son, to try and get him out of trouble by venturing into the Cafe 80s to meet Biff Tannen's grandson Griff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I love Cafe 80s.
Yep,
Me too.
I feel like the whole 21st century segment of the movie we could just pick apart.
Well, the Cafe 80s thing, that really did happen, as far as like we have barcades and we have
Right.
all these nostalgia filled spots, and now that well, what's funny is
the 80s were big.
what's funny is so that is Wild Gunman, and he's like, I'm a crack shot at this. What, you have to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy. The funny part about that is that in 2015 we'd have already had the Kinect, for my Xbox, and it's like, well, that kind of sort of applies, even though physical controllers still, were a thing, but that's kind of amusing. And that was actually Elijah Wood as a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did in 2015. Like nowadays, they're more marketing to people who were children in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, as a late Gen Xer, it's sadly
Brandon
still falls with. Yeah,
You're cutting out, Brandon.
But
Yeah.
back in 15, it was. I don't know what's going on there. Am I back?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what's weird is that there was a strong connection to the 80s in 2015, because that's who they were marketing to at the time. So I gotta say they did that right. And I did want that Pepsi Perfect, but I wasn't gonna pay $50 for it, which is what they charged when they did release Pepsi Perfect. That
Just be happy you're not trying to get the sneakers now, bro. I think those go for like $2,000.
You're gonna go in there and order a Pepsi. Here's a 50.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like-
a great line.
Yeah. That's like that is a bullet we dodged, I guess.
I mean, it's cheaper to buy a Pepsi than it is a bottle of water. So
Yeah.
And of course, they did a nod to the 1985 of Marty's present in the Back to the Future by having Ronald Reagan as one of the characters on one of those TVs.
And him and Ayatollah Khomeini, which is funny. And they're doing it in the style of Max Headroom.
Yep.
Yes.
And also Michael Jackson is a waiter too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is Max Headroom is a thing that I had no idea what it was. Like I had to have someone explain it to me.
Yeah, that seems like one of those things that was around and then it just didn't really have a lot of staying power as time went on. But what's so interesting about that whole sequence is that you do hear on the jukebox, you do hear "Beat It," and I'm thinking, well, good thing that this movie was made when it was, because trying to get the rights to that song nowadays, it's like good luck, because
Apparently,
of how.
Michael Jackson was thrilled to be involved. He had no problem with that.
Hey,
Oh
he
no,
was
I don't. I
like,
don't mean in terms of that, because yeah, I
Hmm.
know that he would have liked this sort of thing. I mean in terms of like just how much it would cost
Oh yeah,
to get
oh yeah.
Yeah.
because the music publishing for his music at that time was not what it would become. The cost
Yeah.
to use film his music in other mediums, but I'm
Right.
just thinking, well, good thing that this movie was made when it was, because someone trying to do that now would have to pay out the ass.
Yeah.
Most
The,
assuredly. So ultimately, I guess we get here a plot where Marty ends up having a conversation with a guy who is trying to save the clock tower again. We get that same whole thing, and he's like, "Well, I wish I could go back in time and put some money on the
Yeah, the
Cubbies."
Cubs. Actually, that's interesting. The Cubs didn't win. The Cubs didn't win the World Series until a year later in 2016. So this movie predicted the Cubs did win, would
A
eventually
World Series.
in the
Mhm.
21st century, and also at the time Miami did not. Back when the movie was made, Miami did not. No, there were no baseball teams in Florida, no MLB teams. So this movie
Mhm.
predicted that Miami would get a team. That Miami would get a team, and eventually Miami and the Cubs. Well, they were the They actually were the Marlins, whereas this movie suggests they were Gators.
Yeah.
But they did face off against each other in the 2003 National League Championship Series.
Which is crazy to think about. And I really think that whole scene is pretty pivotal for this movie, because it shows that while Marty is a good-hearted kid and everything, he can be greedy, and not for any nefarious reasons outside of, well, he's still a kid. And,
Mm.
if you had the time machine or whatever, then wouldn't you want
Mm.
to take advantage of your position
Yeah.
a little bit,
kid, nothing.
Yeah.
I'd be tempted by that
I
same
do.
thing, so I can't really say.
I do like how Doc basically sets him straight on that very, very vociferously.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
this was one of the main reasons supposedly why Crispin Glover did not come back. He had a huge issue with the way that the first movie seemed to imply that now that the McFlys were successful materially, that all was right with the world, you know? And it
Well,
kind of does give you that impression at the end of the film. So
yeah.
apparently Glover took exception to that, and that was one of the reasons he was not invited back.
Well,
Or he was, but
let's also be real. Crispin Glover's a weird fucking dude,
well, yeah.
and he's even more in real life. If you've ever seen him interviewed, he's even more awkward than George McFly could ever hope to be. And so I
Oh,
imagine that he probably rubbed people the wrong way in a lot of areas.
mhm.
I suspect.
It's
It
because they
could.
didn't see his dance moves, man. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
that's
know.
how he won me
They had
over.
watched that. Yeah.
Or the whatever karate that he tried to do on Letterman or whatever that was, that famous interview.
Okay.
Have you seen that? It
I
was
don't
like
think I have.
it
No.
was from like '87 or something, and it was David Letterman, and he was like, I'm good at karate. And it's like, oh my god, the awkwardness is just painful to watch.
Hmm.
But in any case, what they do in here is essentially the old Biff from the year in which they went to, which was what was it, 2016 or
2015.
2015.
2015. 2015, old Biff overhears Doc Brown and Marty and sees his double, and he's like, "Whoa, wait a minute! There's two Martys." So he ends up following them in a taxi,
Yeah.
which they find out that they have to follow Jennifer back to their future home, so
Yeah.
so that they can get Jennifer back and get back to their time period. Well, they do not realize that Biff gets in the car, goes back, gives the book to himself, and comes back in time for Marty to get done looking at this walking dog contraption that evidently got his attention.
Yeah. Well, it got my attention too. Why don't we have that?
Now you know what's an
Actually, I was thinking back
interesting.
to as far as Marty and
Actually,
Jennifer's future home.
Drones. A drone could do it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Now here's an interesting touch. Something that people may not have. Maybe you did notice it, but so we know that old Biff, he obviously is able to sabotage the DeLorean for long enough to do his thing in the past and set things awry. You notice when he gets back that he looks like he's dying of a heart attack, and I think it's because he basically just ensured that the version of him
Right.
that is in that reality, that reality is probably coming apart right as our heroes leave it.
Actually, there was a deleted scene where after he steps out of the DeLorean, we see him like he steps out and he's looking like he's going to have a heart attack, but we see that they actually show that he did vanish.
Yeah. Because I mean, again, his reality ceases to be because he basically unmade it all. So, interesting touch there.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, after Marty and Doc continue. Well, actually, we get the whole Jennifer sees the message and finds out that there's something that Marty had actually done like 15 years before that kind of ruined his life and ruined.
Yeah, he got in the car accident. He broke his hand. He gave up on his music, and he, spent all those years feeling sorry for himself, and that's why he works at this dead end job and is pushed around by his boss, and gets in that bad deal with Needles, and he gets fired for it.
Interestingly though, if you see when he's talking to Needles and his boss Fujitsu. They're showing these little tidbits of information. Like he's on video calls with both of them.
Right.
We're seeing all these little bits of information about them, like family, interests, dislikes, likes and dislikes. I feel like it's kind of. If I feel like that moment was like a little. It was a small, something kind of brief. You might not think about it at the time, watching it at first, but it's kind of like they predicted social media.
Well, not only that, but they predicted our increasingly short attention spans with Marty's son watching several channels at once, which you could totally do nowadays.
Or even when they're sitting at the dinner table, they've got those goggles on, which I feel like are kind of precursors to like mobile tech, like mobile phones, or mobile technology.
Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
Well, and the VR headsets and stuff.
Yep.
I do like it. One of my favorite parts was the whatever that greenery thing that extends from the ceiling, and then his son's like, retract, and he has to smack it to get it to retract.
I kind of feel like nowadays you could have something like that, and Alexa will bring you a bowl of fruit.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I like how they could dehydrate a pizza.
Yeah, that's the one thing that
dehydrated pizza.
I was gonna say, like, I mean, the thing is, like, I know for a fact that they have that technology on the space station and stuff, but they can't obviously do it that quickly. As far as because everything on the space station is dehydrated, and they have to rehydrate it in order to eat it.
Yeah.
So I do want to interject a little fun fact here. I don't know if it's fun, but it's interesting. If you had a brand new pair, like new condition pair of the V1 Nike Air Mags in the box with all the accessories, which sold on December 10th for $15,994, you would be just like $3,000 short of buying an actual DeLorean off a dude in Beverly Hills, California. So I don't know what that does for you guys, but I was doing a little research over here.
Well, I'd be quick to sell that car if I had it. I mean, not that car, but that if I had those Nikes, I would be quick to sell them.
Yeah, I'd rather have the car.
Yeah, cars.
They're cool, but they're not that cool.
Besides, if I want a futuristic pair of sneakers, I'd rather have the ones that Ellen Ripley wore in Aliens.
Which they sold those for real too, didn't they?
They did.
Yes, they did a couple times.
Alrighty. So
now, the TV, just to say, the TV they got perfectly correct. because TVs were not in high definition then, but they did predict that we would move to high definition, even though the picture wasn't.
Yeah.
But the TVs, matter of fact, that's one of the areas where our technology was beyond what they put.
Oh,
Is our
yeah.
TV technology is superior to their technology. We had picture-in-picture early.
I just want
Yeah,
to
we did.
backtrack a bit to when they're in the town in the Hill Valley, the Hill Valley Town Square. So like after Doc sedates Jennifer, they put her in they lay her on a stack of laser discs.
Eh.
I mean,
Yeah.
which way past. And then when Marty's grabbing that hoverboard off that little girl, she's wearing a portable CD player on her head.
Yeah, which boy oh boy did we surpass that quickly, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
a lot
still
of their
we
a lot of
still
their
don't
technology is pretty weird.
well, but we still don't have the hoverboards by Mattel as much that are pink like this one is, but we do have hoverboards that exist in the experimental stages, or we do have hovercrafts, that work because of the air pressure differences, but that's not really the same thing.
Oh yeah.
I still want my pink hoverboard by Mattel. God damn it!
Right? I want my pit bull.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. What are you doing over there?
You gotta have power.
Those boards don't work on water unless you got power.
Yeah.
Actually, that pink hoverboard
You can
still
keep
looks
it.
cool.
I've got a pit bull now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So many quotes. We just
I
can't be
know.
stopped.
Everybody, look at my video right now. Look at me. I'm like, calm yourself, Yago, because I've got my magical animal on my shoulder. Here.
Anyway, so Jennifer runs into her older self and passes out.
Yeah.
So Doc and Marty collect her and they head back to 1985.
Well, and they were damn lucky that she just passed out, and the second possibility didn't happen, which was creating the the time paradox that would destroy the universe.
But Marty had already done that with buying the almanacs, so which we later.
Well, not a time paradox. We just created that alternate timeline, or he allowed for old Biff to do that, which
we'd have all done it.
And then also him and Doc having such a conversation quite loudly without knowing who might be nearby.
Oh yeah, which again, all the more reason for them to destroy the time machine, which they eventually do in part 3. But
a lot of this movie does have a lot of set. This movie is basically a lot of setup for part 3.
It is. Well, but it also, part of the criticism that people have of this movie is that there is so much running around and there is so much talking about how time travel works and about time paradoxes and about alternate timelines and stuff. That honestly was my favorite thing about it when I was a kid, because of that was my introduction to alternate timelines as a concept. And I think it does do a pretty good job of explaining it for a mass audience. Nowadays we're much more aware of alternate timelines, largely thanks to comic books and everything. But at that time I think that was pretty new stuff for people, and so for a basic understanding of an alternate timeline, this one definitely does a good job of it. Now it does kind of adhere to that idea of there only being one timeline, and if you go back in time and change it, then it changes everything and that's it, as opposed to the kind of tree branch kind of model of timelines, which we would get later. But nonetheless, it creates the drama and everything, and the point being that they get back to 1985 and it is kind of a hellscape compared to what they're used to.
Correct.
That alternate timeline does have a bit of controversy today.
It does,
because of what they based. I mean, they based future Biff off of. I mean, in truth, they based it off of a certain individual, which shall not be named on this particular podcast. But it was obvious they based it off of him. Even
they admitted that they did it in the commentaries.
They did.
I mean, even when I watched it, when I was a kid, I knew who they based it off of.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was
and
before
even
he became famous as being, loved or hated by people. So yeah.
well, more than he already was loved or hated by people. But yeah, but it didn't, that alternate 1985 didn't happen, but boy did it predict 2020 pretty good, except for the pandemic
Yeah.
part. More
Well,
so
you
in
don't
terms
know
of
that
the
was
Funny,
social.
actually,
Also,
I just want to point out. So, all right, first of all, you guys have read Watchmen, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
So when
Well seen.
Sir.
when Marty and Doc are in Doc's lab, and
Mhm.
and Doc shows Marty the newspaper about what happened, showing him that he had been
Right.
committed. There's actually a smaller headline saying that Nixon was running for, I think, like a third or fourth term.
Fifth term, I
Fifth term.
believe.
That's a
Yeah.
neat touch.
And
Yeah.
And
maybe the Nixon
this
zombie.
this movie this movie came out in 89, and Watchmen had done its run from 86 to 87, so
Right.
also said in alternate 85.
Yeah, it was a
yes.
definite nod, from
Oh
what I
yeah.
understand.
It's a
Well, I mean,
shame they couldn't have put Doc
Watchmen.
Manhattan and his blue donger up in there. That would have been a good
Yeah,
nod
well,
too.
Watchmen really
Yeah.
did. Watchmen really did shake up the comic world, and so it's not exactly too shocking that someone like Bob Gale would at least have caught wind of it enough to, borrow something for his alternate timeline movie.
Hmm.
well, of course, we're in the alternate world of 1985, and when they drop Jennifer off at the on the porch, Marty realizes that there's bars on the window, and he's like,
Oh
"I
yeah,
don't remember bars being on this window
Yeah.
before."
yeah,
And then he gets dropped off at his home, although. Going down the street and seeing all those cars crash should have been the first pointer out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and plus,
But he ended up going in through the back window, through a padlocked door, which wasn't padlocked before,
Yeah.
yeah, and it is
into
most definitely not his house. That's for
into
sure.
some folks of color's home, which weren't his family.
Uh-uh. Which now what's interesting in the original 1985 timeline, in the alternate 1985 timeline, and in the 2015 timeline, their neighborhood kind of goes to shit. It's in all of those timelines it does. It's only in the nice 1985 timeline that things are okay. So it's like, damn, this promising neighborhood that was so full of promise in the 50s when it's being constructed goes to shit in almost all of the timelines except for the good ending.
Well, and that's kind of realistic to real life, man. I mean, if you
That's
think about
true.
it, even places like Compton or areas like parts of our town here that were like post-war housing that maybe families might have moved into back in those days,
Mhm.
it
Oh
was
yeah.
like a promising neighborhood as things advance and those people are drawn out to the more upscale sort of modern living type neighborhoods. Those areas do become the rundown parts of town.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unfortunate because a lot
I-
of that stuff is good.
One thing I didn't realize is that the neighborhood that Marty is living in now is not the neighborhood that's pictured in the future. It's that up and coming wealthy neighborhood that
Mm-hmm.
he is eyeing. I didn't think about that until this time around. I guess I just wasn't paying attention. Sometimes it happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately, he finds out eventually from getting knocked on the head by evidently Biff's adult hooligans.
Yep.
And he wakes up to his mother, who is definitely more well developed than normal.
Uh, you're
You know, afford some improvements with that
big.
almanac money, bro.
Oh yeah.
Good old fashioned 24th floor or something like that.
Yeah,
27th
back
floor.
on the good old 27th floor.
There we
27th
go.
floor. Well, but what's great is before that you get to see some early hints of the antagonist for the next film, Buford Mad Dog Tannen,
right.
which is
Oh,
a
he calls
The
him Mad
excellent.
introduction,
Oh,
yeah.
That little documentary, quote unquote,
I
about
love
Biff's
that.
life. It was a fun little video.
I
Oh
love
yeah.
that. That's one of my favorite scenes because again, it catches you up, but it also it's like a perverse version of like those Disney World documentaries or like the stuff in that involves Walt Disney.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds you of that, except more Trumpified, and
Mm-hmm.
you know there's just something nice and sinister about it. On top of like you see how unhappy Lorraine is when she's
Mm-hmm.
marrying him, and you see how freaked out Marty is at the whole thing, and it's like they really do a good job of making it look like a dystopian world because
Yeah.
it is, and it was a it again it's so weird that it was a kind of perversion of the 80s as they saw it at the time, and yet it feels more like 2020 than they would have even known.
And when he goes back to the to the what actually that's when he goes to the graveyard and checks out his father's tombstone, and that's where Doc Brown ends up finding him, and so they go end up going back to his evidently shut down workshop or
Yeah,
lab or whatever, and that's where he tells him he found Biff's
Mm-hmm.
cane and the bag for the
Which,
almanac and the
yeah,
receipt that was
i-
still in it.
incidentally, we can partly credit Mr. Glover's reticence about the film with that whole dystopian timeline, because when they couldn't have George McFly, they had to do something with him, so they killed him off, and that was kind of a it helped, I guess, set the tone for the darker timeline in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Uh, and it is interesting. Apparently, I didn't really notice this myself, but I wonder if anyone else did. But I read that supposedly the dates given, his date of birth was April Fool's Day, and the date killed was the Ides of March. It's kind
Mm.
of interesting.
That's a great one. Which now I am sure because of what a massive Frank Capra fan Steven Spielberg is, and obviously he didn't direct this or anything, but him being, executive producer at this particular time, he carried a shitload of influence over this thing.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, I am sure that that graveyard scene was meant to evoke the graveyard scene from It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
because it carries that same emotional weight in the story, um, and it's
Mhm.
stylistically very similar. So I suspect that that was there, and well, that whole scene that follows where he's like, his lab was all boarded up, shut down. So I broke in, borrowed some newspapers from the library, which again, that's a scary thing. The information center being boarded up and shut down, um, because that's a sure sign that you're living in a dystopia when information centers are shut down. But the that whole scene, I think, really puts everything into focus. Plus, like you have like the red glow of the room because it's just barely lit, and they explain the timeline thing, and he's like, I don't get it, Doc. It's like we're in hell or something. No, this is Hill Valley, but I can't imagine hell being much worse. And you have the thunder, the lightning flash, along with this, the head of the cane, and that whole thing is just an excellent scene because of how sinister it is. And I love the very ending of that scene where he's like, we have to find out how, when, and where young Biff got his hands on that sports almanac, and he's like, I'll ask him, and then for whatever
The
reason,
answer.
like that's one of my favorite deliveries of Michael J. Fox in all the movies because like you can tell he's fucking pissed, and that's the most self-assured we've ever seen Marty in any of the movies. Because really the whole series is about the various McFly members learning how to grow a spine, and that's basically what it's about. But like there, he's got it, and it is in full fucking force, and he's gonna go kick his ass. You
Yeah.
know,
Unfortunately, he wusses out in
Well,
the end and won't race that
well,
dude.
no,
and when he goes and asks him, he's watching the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Actually,
no, no,
fistful
it's a
Yeah.
fistful of
It's a
dollars.
Which, by the way,
I always-
actually, is a,
I always thought that that
foreshadow-
was like a recreation of something that happened with Biff Tannen. I mean, Buford Tannen.
It's
Yep.
possible.
It's
It's all. It's
Foreshadowing.
a lot. This movie's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot of foreshadowing in the third movie.
It's
No.
true. Which again, that was such a smart. It's such
Yeah.
a smart setup because you
Well,
don't
they were
know
filmed
it.
back to back.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the advantage of doing that. But that
What were you gonna
was.
say there, Brandon?
Go ahead.
And keep in mind that this whole thing also sets up something that led to his firing, that all this, which, by the way, they left out of the first movie. So my guess is they had this idea in between, is that
Mhm.
Marty has this thing about being called chicken. And it comes into play again
Yeah.
with this Biff Tannen scene. With all of these scenes, they like to call back to it so they can pay it off at the end of the third film.
Mhm.
But it's funny that it's missing from the first film. It's like they decided, like, in between it, he's like, you know what would be cool? He doesn't like to be called chicken.
Well,
Yeah.
Well,
apparently they thought he was too perfect in the first film.
and in the
Yeah.
third
Well,
film, his Mcfly dude that kind of looks like him, which pretty
Mhm.
much is him,
And
basically
Seamus
tells him,
McFly.
yeah,
you remind
Seamus.
me of me brother Martin. He never could take a name calling to his name.
Yeah. Well, I do like his Irish accent in the third one's not too bad. It's what's interesting. You're right though. They did have to kind of retrofit the chicken thing in there because, well, one of the things that they've said about the first film, as amazing of a script as it is that Marty himself doesn't change all that much, at least in the first one. But it's a rare example where the protagonist doesn't really change, but he inspires change in everyone else around him. And there are some movies like Forrest Gump actually operates that way, even though I would argue Forrest changes more than Marty does. Because Forrest has to grapple with the whole randomness versus destiny thing. But like yeah, Marty definitely is an agent of change for everyone else around him in the first one. Here, he goes through much more of a clear arc from two and three, where he has to, on his own accord, he has to break the chain of cowardice, or cowardice slash hot-headedness. You know, because it's a twofold thing. Because like you could say that George broke the chain of cowardice, but Marty has to now break the chain of hot-headedness because you can swing the other way, you know.
Mhm.
So that's a very important aspect to this whole thing. um but yeah, you're right, they did kind of have to retrofit that in because it wasn't there in the first one.
Mm.
So ultimately, after he basically asks him when and where, and all he's got to do is just say Grace Sports Almanac.
Yeah.
And so he takes him into his back off, and he's. I love this exchange between them because
Oh, I know.
it's the first instance where he actually talks to him like an adult instead of you knucklehead kid, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, and Marty can be kind of intimidating in that scene, but also Biff is really intimidating too, and
Yeah.
so it's a good confrontation.
Mhm.
Which, oh, and by the way, the scene just preceding it, you've got two naked girls in the hot tub with
Mhm.
Biff, and I watched that on the Disney Channel, and I was like, damn, damn Disney Channel.
Again,
Very
they played
nice.
Jaws 2 at one point.
I know.
Yep.
But I was like, damn, that's good. But my that whole exchange is really good. It's very like there's a lot of just stone coldness between them, but like I like the fact that he's about to shoot Marty and he's like, "Oh, yeah, but Biff, you forgot about one thing. What the hell is that? What was that? Is that ashtray and then it like hit it
It's a
embedded
Yeah.
its
It was an ashtray
Right.
that was kind of like a pointed star thing.
yeah, well it
Yeah.
kind
Well,
of
because it
embedded it
uses for the matchbooks.
Yeah.
embedded itself in the seat, which I thought was kind of amusing. Which
Mhm.
is it's a good way to break up the because that whole middle section, the whole middle act of part two, it reminds me a bit of the middle act of Temple of Doom, because like Temple of Doom is separated very clearly into three acts, like the kind of silly first act, the dark as fuck middle act, and then the adventurous third act. Here you've got the kind of fun future one act, the really dark middle act, and then the fun 50s act that wraps everything up. But like the dark middle act here, it is pretty dark for this series, but like there are some good breaking of the tension moments. One of which is the fact that the ashtray somehow embeds itself into the seat.
Yeah.
And that's when we get the a moment up on the roof where Biff ends up admitting that he actually killed his father by saying 2 McFlys with the same gun.
Well, and even more scary than that was right before. It's like, what about the police, Biff? They're gonna match up the bullet with that gun. Can't! I own the police. Exactly. Which that's scary enough. You know, the idea that once the information centers are closed down to the people, and once law enforcement is the tool of the ruling class and not of the people, then you know you're living in a dystopia. So, you know, that whole thing really did, you know, get to me. Especially
how many of them motorcyclists were real Hell's Angels?
Well, I mean, it does reflect, if you think about it, in certain ways, even current times.
It does.
I'm not going to go any farther than that, but if you
Yeah.
think about it, when you decide to take any type of media and have an entire distrust for media, for libraries, for any type, when you try to, when you feel like those leaders are above the law,
Yeah.
that's when you do have a dystopia. And there's always a fear of that. We need to recognize it, and we need to be wary of it.
Absolutely. Well, that's why you got to always watch out for the safety of the truth tellers, whether it's journalists or whether it's even comedians, because comedians are truth tellers in their own right. Whenever you got any of them feeling like they're being squelched or mistrusted or shut down or whatever, then you got yourselves a problem.
Oh yeah. But in any case, Doc comes and saves Marty in a damsel in distress kind of a situation, and they're off. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. To
No.
1955.
You're not gonna believe this, Doc. We gotta go back to 1955. I don't believe it. Which I love these, like, how unusual that Biff would choose that particular date, you know. Which I thought that was funny, but it also makes sense as to why he would, because as far as Biff was concerned, that was in the timeline that we know. That was kind of the moment when his life kind of took the turn for the worse, and that George's life took a turn for the better. So of course he's gonna see that as an epicenter for his life, you know. But as we find out, as they travel back in time, which I love the fact that Doc has collected up all this period money, you know, money that would have been printed from 1955 and older.
Right.
You gotta love that, and the fact that he's like, yo, go buy yourself some clothes, something inconspicuous, and he wears like the fucking Blues Brothers look, you know, which is great. And one of my favorite parts of the whole thing is we see again some of the deleted scenes or some of the things that we didn't see before, which is that Biff lives with his grandma, and he's a jerk to the little kids, like, here's your ball, you want it back? Go get it. Tosses it up on the roof, and he's just
and
like...
then of course the part where he ends up like because evidently there's a part where Lorraine ends up going and buying her dress, and he goes and stiffs himself up, and he goes and bugs her again.
Tries looking at her skirt,
and we get that line: "You're gonna regret it, because someday you'll be my wife."
Well, the part that always kind of puzzled me, and I remembered I tried to ask my dad about this because he was the car guy and he knew everything about cars from that era, which was the thing about, like, well, we couldn't get it to start. He's like, nobody can start this car but me. And obviously, old Biff knows how to do it. But I never could figure out what exactly it was that only he could do. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it was the ignition works in a wacky way, or I don't know what. But
I feel like
Yeah.
it's because it's his car, it's his property, and nobody can touch it but him. That's
well, I
how.
know that no
Well,
one can touch it, but I mean, like, I always thought that there was
There
some
was
like,
a specific way that you had to
uh,
actually
Right.
turn on this
yeah,
car.
I just want to make a quick comment. How in going a little bit back to the rooftop scene with Biff, how he admits to murdering
yeah,
George McFly, and we get like a new level of darkness to the character.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
that
And
he's
then
totally capable.
right
of
away, and then almost in the next scene, like you're able to laugh at his stupidity again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's because technically he hasn't gotten drunk with power yet, and because he's still living this pathetic existence of living with his grandma and having to answer to her. And because again, technically anybody you give them too much power and they're not ready for it, then for all we know, they could go off the rails, and especially if they're kind of
Right.
sociopathic like Biff tends to be.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that whole thing is important. Plus, you know, you. I like that you kind of follow Biff's day out.
Mhm.
Yep.
That you follow him, and
Mhm.
you see the Enchantment Under the Sea dance from a bunch of different angles and all these areas that you
Well, yeah,
know,
they're spiking the drink.
yeah. Well, they're doing that, plus like his goons are trying to like, look, how did he get up on stage? I don't know, but when he gets down, we're gonna nail him. How the hell did he change his clothes so fast? And it's like
Yeah.
all these areas where you're like, oh man, it could have gone wrong there, and yet the other Marty is totally unaware of it.
hmm
Mhm.
And
Well,
also, you get a little bit, a bit of Mr. Strickland's character here,
Oh.
where Marty is trying to sneak in and get
yep.
the cover of the almanac, which he doesn't know it's the cover, but ooh la la.
Ooh la la. Ooh
And
la
then
la.
sports statistics, interesting. Homework, Tannen? No, it ain't homework because I ain't at home. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
that line always made me laugh.
Well, plus we went over the line with make like a tree
And
and get
leave.
out of here.
It's
Make
leaving.
like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong. All right then, leave and take your book with you.
Mhm.
You got a safe, get a safe.
Yeah.
But,
Mhm.
ultimately, Marty ends up having to go over to Biff after he's been laid out by his father and get the book again. But then, of course, he's knocked out by himself while he's flying out the door, and Biff grabs it back, and they have a little bit of a car chase. Luckily, Doc comes back into the fray, hands him the hoverboard, and he grabs the car off the dashboard, and once again, manure.
I hate manure.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Well, and
Forrest.
they have to burn the almanac.
Mhm.
Yep, and ultimately that's kind of where the movie leaves us off because
Well, the DeLorean gets struck by lightning, and it sends Doc Brown to the Old West. And
Mhm.
honestly, the scene that totally comes right out of the Twilight Zone or something. It's like, Doc, where'd you go? And he's like, you don't know. And then all of a sudden, creepy 50s guy in the trench coat and the hat appears, and he names Marty McFly, and you're like, holy fuck, what the
Mr.
hell happened?
McFly.
Is your
Is your
name
name
Marty
Marty
McFly?
McFly?
Yeah, I've got something for you, a letter, and we've had it in our possession for the last 70 years.
In
Did you
fact,
say
some of the
70
guys
years?
were thinking it was kind of a running joke whether this guy would actually exist.
Yeah.
Truth be told, we had a pool on running on whether or not
Yeah.
anyone would actually be here.
A
Just
young
like I
man
lost.
with your description at this precise location, this exact minute. It's just like, damn.
This exact time.
Yeah. Which can you imagine being that guy and wondering like you meet this guy that was the prophecy foretold would be there 70 years before, and you meet him and you're like, wouldn't you have a ton of questions for him? I mean, obviously
I'm
he still
wearing,
kind of obviously he
Oh, go
still
ahead.
thinks it's kind of a joke of some kind until he starts talking nonsense about the Doc being in the Old West but he's alive. So he probably thinks he's a nut. But like, can you imagine being that guy and just having all these questions for this, this future man?
Well, and ultimately, after that, he's like, "It's from the Doc. It's from the Doc. He's alive, but it's from the Doc." So,
Yeah.
we
He has
get
to
that
he has to
whole-
go back to meet up with 1955 Doc,
Yep.
who just sent Marty back to the future. He's like, yes, you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future. Great Scott. He faints.
Yeah.
Perfect way to end.
And of course, they end up going through that whole wires whole missing and shit, and the flames rolling and everything. It's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that whole scene with the guy in the rain, like I remembered thinking just what that totally is out of the Twilight Zone, or something that would have happened in the Twilight Zone.
Forrest, if you could lead us into the special features of this.
Yes, special effects. What did everyone think of the special effects with this one?
Well, they were
Even
solid.
better.
Outdated, but
Yeah.
still fun.
Well,
I
it was
would
one of the first films to effectively use characters interacting with themselves. I think what was the technique is like Vista? Was it VistaVision, or am I getting that wrong?
No, it's a split. Like they did a
Yeah, they
split
did
screen.
well, yeah, it was a split screen. They called it something. I can't remember what it was, but they did a split screen. And I think you had a couple scenes with old Biff interacting with young Biff, and you had one with two Doc Browns. And one of the interesting
Shut up about the car.
Yeah.
one of the interesting ones, I had not realized that both of Marty and Jennifer's kids were played by Michael J. Fox.
Wow.
So you had the one scene with him playing himself as an older man,
Yep.
and his son and his daughter,
and Liam Thompson.
but the three Michael J. Foxes in one scene.
Yep.
Yeah.
They handled that pretty well for the 80s. I mean,
They did. Well, and you have to give a special shout out, because Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff, like I think is kind of the unsung hero of the franchise in terms of just how good his acting is, and he did not grow up to be the megastar that like Michael J. Fox or Christopher Lloyd or anybody that they would be, but I mean, he, especially in this film, like when he has to play his young self again, and especially when he has to play old Biff, like when he plays old Biff, he can be really terrifying, I think. And when he plays alternate timeline Biff, he's even more terrifying. And so, and again, that's with makeup, with characterization, with all this stuff, and that's kind of its own effect. And he is, again, he's kind of the unsung hero of that series, I think.
Apparently, he would go on to be in a show called Pig, Goat, Banana Cricket. I've never heard of that one before.
Well, that sounds like the best show ever made, right there.
I mean,
It really does.
Thomas F. Wilson's been a character actor, pretty much been a career character actor.
He has a recurring role on Legends of Tomorrow, which is kind of cool.
It is.
Had a few good things.
Also, the voice
I don't know if this
animated series.
Oh, I don't know if this probably more in the props. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. He also reunited with Christopher Lloyd for Camp Nowhere.
There you go. Good movie.
I have a copy of that. I need to watch it.
I need to watch it.
It's fun stuff. That and Heavyweights are like childhood favorites of mine as far as camp movies without teenagers getting murdered,
Well, but I just wanted to make sure he got his shout out here because I feel like he's not really given his proper due as an actor.
Truly deserving. I will say, I don't. This probably falls more into the props department, but as somebody that suffers back issues, I really dig the hovering like traction deal that Marty's dad is in the future. I think I'd spend a fair amount of my day in those things if I
Upside
had
down,
one
like he
available.
was.
You know?
Probably.
Yeah, just hovering around, eating grapes from the ceiling and shit. Why not?
Your grandfather blew his back out again.
On the golf.
Out on the golf course. But yeah, effects in this movie are better than the first even. And they get to do cooler things like, having flying cars and that kind of stuff. So they painted a much broader canvas in this one.
But the shark still looks fake.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say musically this film is solid. The first one had more in the way of like the pop music of the 50s and the 80s.
Yep.
But this one musically it's still very solid because it's still Robert Zemeckis still Alan Silvestri still kicking ass.
Well, as far as like popular music, you got Michael Jackson, and you've got Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And of course you hear Johnny B. Good again, of course.
Of course.
They should have had just Devo for all the future scenes. That'd have been awesome.
That would have been. No, it doesn't compare to ZZ Top in the third one, though. I have to say.
Yeah, they had a good one.
Yeah.
All right. And then it's okay. And so we've got music. Music. I think special effects, music. I guess
Scenes.
scenes. Yes, favorite scenes, characters. Anything else? Anything really?
I think my favorite scene is when George McFly knocks out Biff again, and we see it from the other angle, and we get to see Marty like react to it. He's like, "Yes."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he only saw the tail end of that before.
Yeah, he was in the trunk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which that was really good that he did get the chance to see the full reward of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And probably hear some of the conversation that him and his mother had while she was coming on to him. That was.
Yeah.
I think
that's right.
College.
That was funny. That was really funny. When I have kids, I'm gonna allow them to do anything they want, anything at all. I thought that was funny.
There was there was one line. What was that one line that something like "You're sounding like my mother," and then I think he said something like, "Well, good," or at least one of us.
Yeah.
I think that my favorite moment in this particular film is probably when Marty wakes up in the hotel and sees his reaction to his mother.
Yeah. Yeah, but you look so big. Yeah. My favorite scene is easily like it's so hard with the first one. This one it's very easy for me, which is when Doc Brown explains the alternate timeline thing and where they start to figure out where the fuck everything went wrong. Not just because again, I think it's interesting what they talk about, not only that, but in terms of staging a scene with like the atmosphere in that moment is really heavy. The sinister mood is in the air. You feel the tension, you feel the dread. It's like it's as close to a horror movie as the series ever gets. Exactly. It's as close to a horror movie as the series ever got, and I'm a big fan of dread hanging in the air in movies, and that does a really good job of that.
Where is Dad? Where is my father? He's where he's been the past 7 years. Oak Park Cemetery.
Yeah, that was good too. But I think it's it's like you see the dread, but you also see the determination in Marty's eyes, like he's gonna kick his fucking ass.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we got Dave. So Dave, Dane, Dustin.
I can go.
Okay, Brandon.
So for me, of course, I do enjoy the initial take on the future, just because it's fun to look at how things compare to now. But I would say that my favorite is when he actually goes in and he confronts Biff in of course the alternate 1985. I just love that scene. Just him actually finding his backbone and going in and just doing that. It's just to me it's just a cool scene. I just really enjoy that.
And again, very good planting and payoff.
Yep.
One movie later with the Fistful of Dollars homage.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, and just the tie-ins to Clint Eastwood, which obviously will explicitly play a role in the third one when he goes under the name Clint Eastwood.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of wonder, I don't know the story of it, but I wonder how the real Clint Eastwood reacted to that. He probably smiled.
He supposedly enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He probably
Which-
was like, well,
I think they asked his. I think they asked his blessing first, and he said, yeah.
I would think so. Now there's an interesting. It is for the third movie, but there's an interesting little touch. So right before Marty goes to 1955 to 1885, back just before that, so he walks out of the theater and he's like, "Yeah, Doc, and I've seen westerns, and Clint Eastwood never wore anything like this." What's really cool about that is you look. So as he walks out of the theater, and what's playing in the movie theater is the second Creature from the Black Lagoon film, Revenge of the Creature, and that was Clint Eastwood's first movie part. So that was a really good touch.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Jake, what was your favorite scene, moment, character?
Favorite scene, moment, or character? It's kind of hard to say. Kind of hard to say because, again, this is one of those things where it's like a lot of little moments. There's a lot of good. I like the aspect overall. I'll go with this instead of a specific thing. I am kind of fascinated by the idea of alternate depictions of characters under different circumstances and events, like the alternate reality, comparison, contrast, what have you. And so in particular, the scenes where they recreated the original film in order to film from a different angle and viewpoint, I just find that really fascinating, the way that they did that. And I thought that was it was just really cool doing that. And again, the whole getting the characters to interact with themselves from different, not themselves necessarily, but the actor playing, but in some cases it was themselves. Yeah. It gives you some interesting, seeing Biff as the hot-headed youth who seems like he doesn't have anything going on upstairs, and then as a cagey older person who's a little bit defeated, but he sees this ray of hope that his life doesn't have to be so horrible after all, and he's actually bullying himself to listen, and I just found that kind of interesting. So I guess that would be my main takeaway, would be the revisiting the old movie from new angle, new perspective, I guess would be the way. Yeah.
All right. And then Mo, what was your favorite? Do you have a favorite scene, character, anything?
I think in terms of favorite character, it'd be like a tie between Doc Brown's hair and his April O'Neil jacket. I think in terms of favorite scenes, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that damn hoverboard scene, man, to me, that's the moment of the movie where they called back to the first one, but did it so extravagantly and awesome that it's just stuck with me since a kid. That Pitbull hoverboard is so badass, too. I'd much rather have a replica of that with my box set than the Mattel one. No offense, Dane. I just, you got to have the power, man.
Yeah, you do. I mean,
I have the power.
I won't dispute you on that one.
And then afterwards, where he tries to give it back to the girl, and she's like, "Nah, I traded."
Yeah,
Whatever.
which that girl made a killing right there.
Oh, and I got to mention again the line about the $50 Pepsi just amused me.
Oh yeah.
God.
Was Pepsi perfect?
Oh yeah. Which I
Too
mean,
bad it couldn't have been Pepsi Blue.
I'm a believer in Pepsi now.
No, for real though, if I had to pick a favorite character, it'd be evil, like alternate future evil Biff. You know, I agree that part's scary as shit. And like as a kid, it definitely rocked my world. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, he does a great job playing that character. I mean, the different Biffs come across so differently in their ability, their competence, and their confidence. It's just really cool to see them.
Hey,
And
but
their moral limits too. You know, because again, it's what you find with morality is that it's in relation to one's society and preferably in relation to one's status in that society. And so the more drunk with power one gets, then the more, eager to maintain that power one gets. And, or in the case of like Buford Mad Dog Tannen, him being like explicitly outside of that law, outside of that society, I would argue that Buford Mad Dog Tannen, out of all of them, that he's the most threatening, at least right away, because he explicitly exists outside of polite society because he is an outlaw, as opposed to like,
Bully.
as opposed to alternate timeline Biff, who is like the capitalist equivalent of a dictator, essentially. So he's more like a bully and an outlaw in plain sight, as opposed to one
I
who's
call it like it is, a gutless yellow-bellied turd.
Yeah, but again, that's just an interesting thing, and he's able to play all those different different sides of this Tannen family.
Not to mention Biff's the grandmother whose voice we hear but we never see. That was actually Thomas F. Wilson voicing Biff's grandmother.
Wow, that's impressive.
All right, and for me, I would say I got two favorite moments. There's a lot of great moments, but I will whittle it down to two that stick with me. The first is when Marty's wandering around the streets of Altered 1985, and he picks up a newspaper and is held up at gunpoint by Strickland, who is like he's wearing a nightgown, but he's armed with like a shotgun, bulletproof vest,
and he's got that roll of ammunition around him in a cross.
Yep.
Section like thing, and they're like, Mr. Strickland!
Drive-by shooters, and he's like,
hey, Strickland! Blam, 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 blam.
Yeah, he ducks, and then he shoots at them and runs at them, yelling, "Eat lead, slackers!"
Yeah, that was pretty badass.
And yeah, most badass moment was Strickland. And then also when Marty's in another Strickland-related moment when Marty is in Strickland's office trying to get the almanac, and he fishes it out of the garbage can. And he's looking through, and it's really a girly magazine, and he's just like, ooh la la, ooh la la, and the music just like you could just hear the music just slightly raising.
Yeah, well, and I like the interaction that Strickland has with young Biff, in conjunction with that, because again he reinforces the fact that he hates slackers, and you gotta love in part 3. You gotta love the ancestor of the Stricklands there, yeah, because he was pretty badass, I have to say, and he's the kind of guy you want in a backwards town like that,
So, ultimately, I think that's everyone, correct?
Yeah.
Alrighty, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along with us on this Back to the Future journey, and hopefully you enjoyed our ramblings on this film as we continue our sci-fi Days of Future Past next week with the Escape from Double Feature, starring My Name is Snake.
Mhm.
So stay tuned for some more exciting adventures here on Inside Movies Galore. Say good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Night,
night.
everyone.
All right.